The first tool in my toolkit, and by the way, I've learned this by living my life. I've learned it from all kinds of business people that I've been fortunate to work side by side with over the years as either a coach or a consultant, or in this case as a speaker. And I've learned that the best business people in the world, the people who are most successful at adapting to change, they always, no matter how difficult the change is, they view it as opportunity. For example, I am making a lot of connections on LinkedIn lately. You go online and you make some connections, you meet some new people, and when I meet them, I ask them a question. I say, we've all been going through a pretty difficult change lately, but I believe change creates opportunities. What opportunities has this created for you? And it's very interesting to get the responses. They tend to fall into two camps. One camp is very negative, and happily there's not as many in this camp, but they're there. There is no opportunity. I lost my job. I can't do what I used to do. This isn't fair. There was a doctor that wrote me, and he was sort of the poster child for this. I mean, I felt bad for the guy. Healthcare is all screwed up, and this is all screwed up, and there's no leadership, and all these other sorts of things. And I got what he was saying, but he was putting himself into a box that he was going to have a very hard time getting out of. I tried to give him some encouragement and some words of advice. Now, just the other day, I heard from a guy named Steve. Steve was in 3 different businesses when the pandemic hit. He was in the event business, kind of putting on events like this. He was in real estate and something else I can't remember. But he said, Gary, all three of my jobs got wiped out by the pandemic. He goes, but I have been an artist all my life, and I'd kind of drifted away from it. And once I lost all these jobs, I went back to my art. And I discovered how much I loved it. And I'm building a business now around my art. And his last line, guys, was, Gary, I've never been happier. Stop and think about that. Pandemic wipes out his business. He's never been happier because of how he chose to adapt. Remember now, I'm not saying it's always easy to adapt, but you can do it. Let me give you another business example, a little closer to home. See if you can guess who I'm talking about. Some of you might know this story. But Richard was a guy who owned like records and a record and electronics store back in the early 80s in the upper Midwest. And he had built it up to a very successful chain, about 8 or 10 stores, until change came along. Now guys, some changes we can see coming. Like we know we got a presidential election coming up. We don't know how it's going to turn out, but we know change is coming. And then other changes like this pandemic and also like what happened to Richard, you can't see coming. A tornado came and boom! Destroyed his largest, most profitable store within a period of about 5 minutes. And Richard goes from this very successful guy to deeply in trouble because his most successful, profitable store is in ruins. What he did next is beautiful. One, he had built relationships with his people, just like I know you guys build great relationships with your customers. You wouldn't be good at what you do if you didn't. And by the way, the pandemic hasn't changed those relationships. Matter of fact, it creates an opportunity to make them even stronger. How do I know Richard built relationships? Because within 2 hours, he had about 60 employees. And within about 2 hours, every single employee was on that site helping them clean up. And then they put their heads together. You got to work together to solve this stuff. Don't do it alone. You guys are sitting there with 15 of you and some other folks, and you've got plenty of people share ideas. So they sat around, they shared ideas, and they said, what can we do? They said, well, you know what we can do? We can do something that we never could have done before. We can have a tornado sale. So they decided a tornado sale was they'd fix up all their stuff. They'd have to put it out in the parking lot because the store is all damaged. They'd have some fun. They'd put on a t-shirt, a little slogan on the back, and they took their advertising budget and put it all into this one sale. 6 days after the tornado, they had this sale. Now, I'd like to ask my audiences, when Richard looked out on his parking lot the day of the sale, what do you think he saw? My sort of like my doctor kind of friends, they say things like, probably another tornado. But the people more like Steve say it probably was very successful. No, it wasn't very successful. It was the most successful sale in the history of that company. It was so successful, they went running back to the warehouse, got stuff that even hadn't been through the tornado, because they were discounting this stuff. That's what they said. They said, hey, it's been through a tornado sale, we'll discount our high-end stuff for you. And they made more money in that one weekend than they normally made in a month. So every year they would have a tornado sale on the anniversary, but eventually Richard said, wait a minute, The way we've been doing business up till now has worked. It's been profitable, just like the way you guys were doing business up before this pandemic was working, and it was profitable, and you had your career set. That doesn't mean there isn't a better way. And in Richard's case, he said, I think this tornado has shown me a better way. So he eventually changed his business model from kind of high-end stuff at a high price and a formal sort of setting to more of a warehouse kind of setting where people could just walk through the shelves and buy discounted electronics. At the time of the tornado, Richard had about 10 stores, I think it was. Today, that chain is still around. It was called Sound of Music back then. But when he changed the model, he changed the name. Best Buy. Best Buy got its start when its founder, Richard Schultz, was nearly wiped out by a tornado, guys. And today, Best Buy is, they got over 1,000 stores, and I think their revenue last year was, in 2019, 42 billion, something like that. So that's how I encourage you to think about change. Now go back, I said change is hard because it's hard. It's not always easy to see that opportunity, and the opportunity might not appear right away, and there are no guarantees, but I do know there's one guarantee. If you don't try something new, you're not gonna find something new. So that's tool number one. Train yourself to say, okay, change has happened, where is the opportunity?